The stars had watched humanity for a very long time, and the beings who lived among those stars had watched even longer than that, waiting for the right moment to make themselves known to the small blue planet spinning quietly in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. Ambassador Thelvrix stood at the observation window of his ship, the Harmonious Ascent, and looked down at Earth with a mixture of excitement and worry that made his crystalline body flicker with soft purple light. His species, the Varani, were beings made of living crystal, and their emotions showed through colors that danced across their transparent forms like light through a prism. Today was the day that would change everything for the humans below, and Thelvrix had been chosen to guide them into their new future among the stars. It was an honor that few ambassadors ever received, and he intended to perform his duty with the dignity it deserved. Behind him, the ceremonial chamber of the Harmonious Ascent buzzed with activity as representatives from 12 different spacefaring species took their positions. There were the tall, insect-like Kralith warriors who clicked their mandibles impatiently, the floating gas bags of the Uvani scholars who hummed ancient hymns, and the scaled merchants of the Thessic Trade Consortium who counted this moment in potential profit margins. All of them had come to witness the awakening of humanity. The ceremony they were about to perform was older than most of their civilizations, a sacred ritual that had been used to welcome new species into the galactic concord for over 50,000 years. At its center was the offering of Vethkai, the elixir of stars, a drink so powerful that it had changed the course of galactic history more times than anyone could count. Vethkai was not merely a beverage. It was a key that unlocked the doors of perception, a liquid that could expand the mind of any sentient being and show them the true nature of the universe. One sip could grant visions of cosmic truth, forge unbreakable bonds between species, and elevate primitive minds to enlightenment. It was also incredibly dangerous. The nectar used to create Vethkai came from the singing nebulae, clouds of cosmic gas that hummed with energy older than the stars themselves. Most species required years of genetic modification before they could safely consume even a single diluted drop. And many civilizations had fallen into chaos when they discovered its power too quickly. But the Galactic Concord had perfected the ceremony over millennia, and they knew exactly how to introduce new species to the elixir's embrace. First came the single sip, then the visions, then the guidance of more experienced species who would help the newcomers understand what they had seen. Thelvrix had performed this ceremony 17 times before, and each time filled him with the same sense of wonder. Watching a species take its first step toward cosmic awareness was like watching a flower bloom in fast motion, beautiful and humbling all at once. The human shuttle docked with a gentle thump that vibrated through the ship, and Thelvrix turned to face the entrance of the ceremonial chamber. His crystalline heart pulsed with anticipation as the doors slid open. Captain Elena Vasquez walked in first, her boots clicking against the polished floor with a confidence that surprised Thelvrix. She was shorter than he had expected, with dark hair pulled back in a practical knot and eyes that scanned the room with sharp intelligence. Behind her came 5 more humans, her crew, each of them looking around at the assembled aliens with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely contained excitement. They did not seem afraid, which was unusual. Most species trembled when they first encountered the full diversity of galactic life. But these humans simply nodded politely at the various beings as if meeting aliens was something they did every day. "Captain Vasquez," Thelvrix said, stepping forward and extending his crystalline hand in the human greeting gesture he had studied. "Welcome to the Harmonious Ascent, and welcome to the Galactic Concord. We have waited a long time for this moment." Elena shook his hand firmly, and Thelvrix was surprised by the warmth of her touch. Humans ran so hot compared to most species, their bodies burning with an internal fire that seemed almost dangerous. "Thank you, Ambassador," Elena replied with a smile that showed her teeth, a gesture that made several of the more nervous species step back. "We are honored to be here, and we look forward to learning about the wider galaxy." Thelvrix led the humans to the center of the chamber, where a pedestal held the ceremonial chalice of Vethkai. The chalice was ancient, made from metals that no longer existed anywhere in the known universe, and it glowed with a soft bioluminescent light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Inside the chalice, the Vethkai shimmered with colors that seemed to exist beyond the normal spectrum, shifting and changing in ways that hypnotized anyone who looked too long. The assembled aliens fell silent as Thelvrix began the ritual words that had been spoken at every first contact ceremony since the founding of the Conquered. "Before you stands the elixir of stars," Thelvrix intoned, his voice resonating through the chamber. "The gift of the cosmos to all sentient beings. Drink and know the truth of the universe. Drink and join your mind to the infinite. Drink and become one with all who have come before." He lifted the chalice and presented it to Captain Vasquez, who took it with both hands and peered inside with obvious curiosity. "So I just drink this?" she asked, sniffing the liquid experimentally. "One sip," Thelvrix confirmed. "Just one sip to begin your journey toward enlightenment." Elena shrugged, raised the chalice to her lips, and drank. The entire chamber held its breath. The Kralith stopped clicking, the Uvani stopped humming, and even the Thessic merchants forgot about their profit calculations. This was the moment of transformation, the instant when humanity would be forever changed. Elena lowered the chalice and smacked her lips thoughtfully, her expression one of mild surprise, but nothing more. She was not screaming in cosmic ecstasy, not collapsing in overwhelmed revelation, not even swaying slightly from the elixir's effects. "Huh," she said, tilting her head. "That is actually pretty good. Tastes kind of like grape juice with maybe a little mango in there." She turned to her crewmate, a muscular man named Sergeant Torres, and handed him the chalice. "Here, try this. It is not bad at all." Torres took the chalice and, to the horror of every alien watching, drained the entire thing in 3 long gulps. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and nodded appreciatively. "Yeah, that is nice," he agreed. "Refreshing. You guys have any more of this stuff?" Thelvrix felt his crystalline form crack slightly from the shock. The Vethkai was gone, the entire ceremonial portion consumed by a single human, and neither of the humans showed any sign of the transcendent experience that should have overwhelmed them completely. The Uvani scholar nearest to Thelvrix made a sound like a deflating balloon. "Impossible," the scholar whispered. "That amount would have killed any of us 10 times over." But the humans just stood there, looking around expectantly, wondering why everyone had gone so quiet. Captain Vasquez raised an eyebrow at the stunned assembly. "Is something wrong?" she asked with genuine confusion. "Did we do the ceremony incorrectly?" Thelvrix could not find the words to answer. In 50,000 years of first contact ceremonies, nothing like this had ever happened, and he had absolutely no idea what to do next. The galaxy had prepared to welcome humanity into enlightenment, but humanity, it seemed, had other plans entirely. The news spread through the Galactic Concord like wildfire through dry grass, jumping from ship to ship and planet to planet until every corner of civilized space had heard the impossible story. The humans had consumed enough Vethkai to kill a dozen Kralith warriors, and they had asked for more as if it were nothing but a pleasant afternoon drink. Dr. Yenix was the first scientist to arrive at the harmonious ascent, her crystalline body flickering with the bright blue of intense scientific curiosity. She was the foremost xenobiologist in the Varani collective, and she had spent her entire career studying how different species reacted to the elixir of stars. She had never encountered anything like this. "I need to run tests," she announced to Ambassador Thelvrix the moment she stepped off her shuttle. "Full biological workups on every human present. If we do not understand why they are immune, the Concord will tear itself apart with speculation. Thelvrix agreed immediately, and to his relief, the humans were happy to cooperate. Captain Vasquez even seemed amused by all the attention. "Sure, take all the samples you need," Elena said as Dr. Yenix set up her equipment in the ship's medical bay. "But I have to warn you, I am not sure what you are expecting to find. We are pretty normal as far as humans go." Dr. Yenix did not respond. She was too busy staring at the readings from her first scan of Sergeant Torres, her crystalline form shifting through colors so quickly that she looked like a broken rainbow. "This cannot be right," she muttered, adjusting her instruments and running the scan again. "These numbers are impossible." The results came back the same, and Dr. Yenix felt her scientific understanding of the universe begin to crumble. According to her equipment, the human body was a chemical factory of unimaginable power, producing substances that made Vethkai look like flavored water. She called an emergency meeting with every scientist aboard the Harmonious Ascent, projecting her findings onto the main screen of the conference room while the assembled experts watched in stunned silence. The human crew had been invited as well, though they seemed more interested in the snacks that the Thessic had provided. "What you are looking at," Dr. Yenix began, pointing to a complex molecular diagram, "is a substance called adrenaline. Humans produce it naturally when they are excited, frightened, or in danger." An Uvani scholar floated closer to the screen, his gas bag body pulsing with confusion. "The structure looks similar to Vethkai's active compound." "It is not just similar," Dr. Yenix replied. "It is more potent. A single surge of human adrenaline contains enough neurological impact to send any of us into a coma." Gasps echoed through the room, but Dr. Yenix was not finished. "That is just the beginning," she continued, bringing up more diagrams. "Humans also produce dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, and dozens of other compounds that affect their minds and bodies. Each one of these would be classified as a dangerous controlled substance under galactic law." She turned to face the human crew, who had stopped eating and were now paying attention with expressions of mild surprise. "How do you survive?" Dr. Yenix asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do you walk around every day with this much chemical warfare happening inside your own bodies?" Captain Vasquez exchanged glances with her crew, then shrugged. "I mean, it is just how we are. We do not really think about it." "You do not think about it?" the Uvani scholar repeated, sounding horrified. "You experience levels of neurological stimulation that would kill most sentient species, and you do not think about it?" "Well, when you put it that way, it sounds weird," Sergeant Torres admitted, scratching his head. "But yeah, basically. Sometimes we feel happy, sometimes we feel sad, sometimes we feel excited. It is just life." Dr. Yenix brought up one final diagram, this one showing a comparison between human brain activity and the brain activity of other species under the influence of Vethkai. The human baseline was higher than everyone else's peak. "This is what I cannot explain," she said, her voice trembling. "Human consciousness operates at a level that we only reach during transcendent experiences. Their normal, everyday existence is what we consider cosmic enlightenment." Ambassador Thelvrix stepped forward, his crystalline form pale with shock. "Are you saying that humans are constantly in a state of Vethkai enhancement?" "Not constantly," Dr. Yenix corrected. "Their levels fluctuate based on their experiences. When they feel what they call love, their brain chemistry spikes to levels that would be fatal to a Varani. When they listen to music they enjoy, their pleasure centers activate with more intensity than a Kralith berserker in full battle frenzy." A Kralith warrior in the back of the room made a strangled sound of disbelief. His species had built their entire martial culture around the chemical enhancement they received from microdoses of Vethkai, and now he was learning that humans achieved greater effects from listening to a catchy tune. "I want to make sure I understand this correctly." said Trade Master Vex of the Thessic Consortium, his scaled face twisted in concentration. Humans did not evolve to resist Vethkai. They evolved to be naturally stronger than Vethkai? Exactly, Dr. Yenix confirmed. Their planet, Earth, is what we would classify as a Category 12 death world. The gravity is crushing, the atmosphere is corrosive, the radiation from their sun is intense, and they share their world with millions of species that want to eat them. She pulled up images of Earth that made several aliens gasp in horror. Massive predators with enormous teeth, venomous creatures smaller than a finger, plants that could poison with a single touch, and natural disasters that could level entire cities. To survive in such an environment, Dr. Yenix continued, humans developed the most powerful neurological system we have ever encountered. Their bodies reward them for surviving danger with pleasure chemicals, punish them for taking foolish risks with pain and fear, and motivate them to protect their communities with intense emotional bonds. They turned themselves into living chemical weapons, the Uvani scholar breathed, just to stay alive on their horrible planet. Captain Vasquez raised her hand like a student in a classroom. I feel like I should be offended, but honestly, this is kind of fascinating. Are you saying that aliens cannot feel things as strongly as we do? The room fell silent, and Dr. Yenix realized that the humans had just stumbled onto the most significant discovery of the meeting. For all their technology and cosmic knowledge, the species of the Galactic Concord had never experienced emotions with the raw intensity that humans did every single day. No, Dr. Yenix admitted quietly, we cannot. What you call falling in love would overwhelm our neural pathways. What you call grief would shut down our cognitive functions. What you call joy would stop our hearts. The humans looked at each other with expressions of genuine sympathy, and that simple emotional response sent another spike through Dr. Yenix's monitoring equipment. Even their compassion was off the charts. That sounds really sad, Elena said softly. I cannot imagine going through life without feeling things deeply. How do you find meaning in anything? It was a simple question, asked with honest curiosity, but it hit the assembled aliens like a meteor strike. They had spent millennia chasing transcendence through the elixir of stars, building entire religions and philosophies around those brief moments of heightened awareness, and now they learned that humans lived in that state naturally. Ambassador Thelvrix looked at the human crew with new eyes, seeing them not as primitive beings in need of enlightenment, but as something far stranger and more wonderful. They were creatures of impossible intensity, burning with emotional fire that should have consumed them long ago, yet somehow they thrived. The Galactic Concord had not discovered a species ready to be uplifted. They had discovered a species that had already climbed higher than anyone else, using nothing but their own biology and their stubborn refusal to surrender to a universe that seemed determined to destroy them. Dr. Yenix saved her data and prepared her report for the Concord leadership, knowing that this information would change everything. The galaxy had just become a very different place, and humanity was at the center of that change whether they realized it or not. In the darker corners of the galaxy, where law meant nothing and profit meant everything, the criminal underworld listened to Dr. Yenix's findings with very different ears. While the legitimate powers of the Concord debated what humanity's existence meant for galactic philosophy, the crime lords saw something much simpler. They saw money. Boss Krell of the Syndicate Eternal sat in his private chamber aboard a station hidden in the shadows of a dying star, his massive insectoid body clicking with excitement as he watched the stolen recording of the scientific presentation. Around him, his lieutenants shifted nervously, waiting for their leader to speak. A species that produces chemicals stronger than Vethkai, Krell buzzed, his mandibles dripping with anticipation. Naturally, without any cultivation or processing. Do you understand what this means? It means we need to acquire some humans. his second-in-command replied. Harvest their neurological compounds and create a new product, something that could affect even the humans themselves. Krell's compound eyes glittered with greed. Exactly. We will call it Superveth, and every species in the galaxy will pay anything we ask for a chance to experience what humans feel every day. Similar conversations happened in criminal hideouts across the galaxy. The merchant guilds calculated the potential profits from human-derived substances, the black market geneticists began designing extraction procedures, and the slavers who operated in the lawless regions started planning kidnapping expeditions to Earth. Within weeks, the first operations were launched. The Syndicate Eternal sent their best infiltration team to Earth, a group of shape-shifting aliens who could pass as human with careful preparation. Their mission was simple: capture several humans, transport them to a hidden facility, and begin harvesting their precious neurochemicals. The team landed in a major Earth city under cover of darkness, confident that their advanced technology and centuries of criminal experience would make the job easy. These were primitive beings who had only recently discovered that they were not alone in the universe, and surely they would be no match for professional galactic operatives. 3 days later, every member of the team was in human custody. Earth's intelligence agencies had been watching the skies since first contact, and they had noticed the unauthorized landing almost immediately. Human investigators tracked the alien team through a combination of satellite surveillance, street cameras, and old-fashioned detective work that the aliens had never encountered before. The shapeshifters had not counted on humans being paranoid by nature, or on their centuries of experience catching spies and criminals. They had not expected security cameras on every corner, facial recognition software that noticed subtle inconsistencies in their disguises, or police officers who found their behavior suspicious for reasons they could not quite explain. When Boss Krell received the news that his entire team had been captured, he flew into a rage that shattered several of his chamber's viewing screens. "How is this possible?" he screamed. "They were my best operatives." The answer came from an unexpected source. A human transmission broadcast on open channels, clearly intended to be intercepted by anyone who was listening. Captain Elena Vasquez appeared on the screen, now wearing a military uniform with several new medals on her chest. "This message is for whoever sent the aliens we caught last week," she said calmly. "We know why you came, and we want to make something very clear. Humanity is not interested in being harvested, kidnapped, or exploited in any way." She leaned forward, and her expression shifted from professional to something harder and more dangerous. "We have spent our entire history fighting each other, and we have become very, very good at it. If you think that your criminal organizations are scary, you should see what we did to our own criminals before we even knew aliens existed." The transmission showed images of human history, wars, police actions, intelligence operations, and the complete dismantling of crime empires that had once seemed untouchable. The aliens watching felt a chill run through their various body parts. "We are going to return your operatives," Elena continued. "Consider it a professional courtesy. But if anyone else attempts to kidnap our citizens for any reason, we will take it personally. And you really do not want us taking things personally." The transmission ended, and the criminal underworld fell into nervous silence. They had expected easy prey, a species too primitive and disorganized to protect itself, but instead they had found something entirely different. Humans were not prey. They were predators who had clawed their way to the top of the food chain on a death world, and they did not take kindly to being hunted. Over the following months, more criminal organizations tried their luck, and every single one of them failed. The Thessic slave traders sent a heavily armed ship to abduct humans from a remote village, only to discover that the remote village contained several retired military personnel who happened to own an impressive collection of weapons. The black market geneticists tried to bribe human scientists with offers of galactic technology, but the scientists reported the approaches to their governments immediately. It turned out that humans had a concept called patriotism that made them surprisingly resistant to betraying their own species. Even the most subtle approaches failed. When criminal agents tried to manipulate human society through economic pressure, they found themselves outmaneuvered by human financial experts who had centuries of experience dealing with exactly those kinds of tactics. The Merchant Guild sent a delegation to complain to the Galactic Concord, arguing that humanity was interfering with legitimate business interests. But Ambassador Thelvrick simply laughed. "You tried to enslave a sentient species," he said, "and you are surprised that they defended themselves. I think the humans have a word for this situation. They call it karma." Back on Earth, the various governments had come together in a rare moment of unity to address what they were calling the alien tourist problem. Despite the seriousness of the kidnapping attempts, most humans found the whole situation more amusing than frightening. "Did you hear about the shapeshifters?" people asked each other at dinner parties and coffee shops. "They could not even make it 3 days without getting caught. So much for advanced alien technology." The casual attitude drove the criminal underworld crazy. They were used to species that trembled at their reputation, that offered tribute and begged for mercy, that understood their place in the galactic hierarchy. Humans just made jokes about them. Captain Vasquez, now promoted to Rear Admiral and assigned as humanity's official liaison to the Galactic Concord, gave regular press conferences about the ongoing criminal attempts. Her calm, almost bored demeanor became famous across the galaxy. "Yes, we caught another kidnapping team last Thursday," she said during one briefing. 7 aliens this time, very professional, excellent equipment. They lasted almost a full week before local police picked them up for loitering suspiciously outside a grocery store. A reporter raised his hand. "Admiral, are you concerned about the increasing sophistication of these attempts?" Elena smiled, and that smile made crime lords across the galaxy shiver. "Not particularly. They keep underestimating us, and we keep catching them. Frankly, at this point it is almost relaxing. We have dealt with much worse from our own species." The message was clear, and eventually, even the most ambitious criminal organizations had to accept reality. Humanity was not going to be exploited, kidnapped, or harvested. They were too alert, too organized, too experienced, and most frustratingly of all, too completely unimpressed by threats and intimidation. For the first time in galactic history, the underworld had encountered a species that simply refused to be afraid, and they had no idea how to handle it. While the criminal underworld licked its wounds and retreated to the shadows, a far more dangerous enemy was watching humanity with eyes full of holy fire. The theocracy of the Burning Path had ruled over 40 star systems for 10,000 years, and they had built their entire civilization around one simple belief. The Vethkai was a gift from the divine architects, the beings who had created the universe itself, and consuming the sacred elixir was the only way to touch the infinite and understand the cosmic truth. Every member of the theocracy drank Vethkai during their most important rituals, from birth celebrations to funeral rites, and the religious experience it provided was the foundation of everything they believed. Now they had learned of a species that was immune to the sacred drink, and Hierarch Zolthen, the supreme leader of the Burning Path, could not accept what that meant. "They are an abomination," he declared to his council of priests, his serpentine body coiled around his throne in agitation. "A corruption of the natural order that the divine architects intended. If creatures can exist without needing the Vethkai to reach enlightenment, then what does that say about our entire faith?" The priests murmured nervously, because they could see where their hierarch's logic was leading, and they were frightened of the destination. "We cannot allow them to continue," Zol then continued, his voice rising with religious fervor. Their very existence is a challenge to everything we believe. If we do not destroy them, others will begin to question the necessity of the sacred elixir, and our way of life will collapse. He rose from his throne, spreading his arms wide in a gesture that sent his ceremonial robes billowing. The divine architects demand that we cleanse this blasphemy from the galaxy. I am declaring holy war against humanity. The War of Sober Minds, as historians would later call it, began 3 months after the declaration, when the theocracy's battle fleet appeared in the Sol system with weapons charged and prayers on their lips, over 2,000 ships, crewed by warriors who had consumed massive doses of Vethkai to enter their sacred berserker state, descended upon humanity's home. The Galactic Concord sent urgent warnings, expecting to witness the extinction of a promising young species. The theocracy had crushed dozens of civilizations before, and their Vethkai-enhanced warriors were considered unstoppable. What happened instead shocked the entire galaxy. The human military had been preparing since first contact, knowing that eventually someone would decide they were a threat. They had studied every record of galactic warfare they could find, analyzed the tactics of every known hostile species, and developed strategies specifically designed to counter enemies who relied on chemical enhancement. When the theocracy fleet entered weapons range, they were met not by panicked defenders, but by a calm, coordinated response that threw their enhanced minds into confusion. Human ships did not behave like any enemy the theocracy had ever faced. Instead of charging forward in aggressive confrontation, the human vessels fell back in careful formation, drawing the zealot ships into carefully prepared kill zones. Instead of fighting with passionate fury, human commanders issued precise orders in flat, professional tones that their enemies found deeply unsettling. "Why do they not fear us?" screamed one theocracy captain as human missiles destroyed his escort ships with surgical precision. "Why can we not sense their terror?" The answer was simple, but incomprehensible to the Vethkai-saturated minds of the zealots. Humans did not fight with rage or fear or any of the emotions that alien species expected. They fought with something far more dangerous. They fought with professionalism. Admiral Chen Wei commanded the human defense from the bridge of the carrier Unconquered, watching the battle unfold on her tactical display with calm focus. Around her, officers called out information and adjusted targeting solutions without a hint of panic in their voices. "Enemy formation is breaking up," her tactical officer reported. "They are charging our positions in small groups instead of maintaining unit cohesion." Admiral Chen nodded. This was exactly what she had expected. Their enhancement drugs make them brave and aggressive, but they also make them impatient and unable to coordinate. Continue the planned withdrawal and let them exhaust themselves chasing us. The battle lasted for 3 weeks, and every day brought new disasters for the theocracy. Their berserker warriors could not understand enemies who refused to engage in honorable combat, who fell back when pushed and pushed when least expected, who treated warfare like a mathematics problem rather than a sacred contest. The Battle of Proxima Station became the turning point. A force of 5,000 theocracy ground troops landed on the station, their minds burning with Vethkai-fueled visions of divine victory. They charged through the corridors, screaming prayers and firing wildly, expecting the human defenders to break and flee before their holy wrath. Sergeant Maria Torres, who had been the first human to finish an entire chalice of Vethkai at the first contact ceremony, was in command of the station's defense force. She had set up positions throughout the facility, creating overlapping fields of fire that would stop any conventional assault. But the theocracy warriors were not conventional. They kept coming even as their comrades fell, their drugged minds unable to process defeat, their bodies pushing forward long past the point where any sane being would have retreated. Torres watched them come with something between pity and professional respect. "They really believe they cannot lose," she said to her squad. "Poor bastards." The fighting lasted 18 hours. And when it was over, Torres found herself sitting in the command center playing cards with her squad while unconscious zealots littered the corridors. They had not killed most of the attackers because they had not needed to. The Theocracy warriors had simply collapsed from exhaustion when their Vethkai enhancement wore off. They just kept passing out, Torres explained later to the amazed commanders who came to inspect the aftermath. Their bodies could not maintain that level of stimulation forever. And when the crash came, they went down hard. We just had to wait them out and stun anyone who got too close. News of the Battle of Proxima Station spread through the galaxy, and the Theocracy's reputation for invincibility shattered like glass. Species they had conquered centuries ago began to whisper about rebellion. And their own priests started to question whether the divine architects truly supported this war. Hierarch Zol then refused to accept defeat, sending wave after wave of warriors against human positions, but the result was always the same. The humans fought with patient, methodical efficiency, while the zealots burned themselves out in futile charges. After 6 months of constant losses, the Theocracy's War Council finally convinced the Hierarch to seek peace. They had lost over 2/3 of their fleet and nearly 1 million warriors, and they had not taken a single human world. Admiral Vasquez represented humanity at the peace negotiations, facing Hierarch Zol then across a table on neutral ground. The Hierarch looked diminished, his scales dull and his eyes haunted by everything he had witnessed. "How?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How did you defeat our sacred warriors without the blessing of the Vethkai?" Elena considered the question carefully before answering. "Your warriors fought because their drugs told them they could win. Ours fought because they believed in what they were protecting. When the drugs wore off, your warriors had nothing left. When our soldiers got tired, they took a coffee break and came back. Belief is stronger than chemistry, Hierarch, and we believe in ourselves." The peace treaty ended the War of Sober Minds, but its effects would echo through galactic history forever. The Theocracy never recovered its former power, and the legend of the humans who could not be intimidated spread to every corner of civilized space. Humanity had proven something important. They did not need cosmic elixirs or divine blessings to face the darkness. They had faced worse things in their own history and survived. They would face whatever the galaxy threw at them the same way. With stubborn determination, black coffee, and an absolute refusal to be impressed. 50 years had passed since the day Captain Elena Vasquez first tasted Vethkai and changed the course of galactic history, and the universe looked very different from the way it had before. The Galactic Concord still existed, but its power dynamics had shifted in ways that nobody could have predicted. Ambassador Thelvrix, now ancient by Varani standards, stood in the grand ballroom of the new Concord headquarters on a planet the humans had named Unity Station. His crystalline body was clouded with age, but his mind remained sharp, and his colors still flickered with emotion as he watched the celebration unfolding around him. The 50th anniversary of First Contact had brought representatives from every species in the galaxy, and at the center of the festivities were the humans, laughing and talking and doing something they called dancing that made the more dignified species uncomfortable. Admiral Elena Vasquez, now retired and gray-haired but still carrying herself with the same confident posture she had shown half a century ago, raised a glass of Vethkai in a toast that quieted the crowd. 50 years ago, you offered us a drink that you said would change us forever, she said, her voice carrying across the ballroom. You were right, but not in the way you expected. It was not the drink that changed us. It was meeting all of you. Cheers erupted from the human contingent, and even the aliens joined in with their own forms of approval. Clicking mandibles, glowing colors, resonating hums, and dozens of other expressions of appreciation filled the air. Thelvrix watched it all with a complex mixture of emotions that would have been impossible for him to feel 50 years ago. Contact with humans had changed his species in ways that were still being studied and debated. The Varani had always been calm and logical, their crystalline biology limiting their emotional range to pale shadows of what other species experienced. But exposure to human emotional intensity had begun to unlock something in their neural pathways, a capacity for feeling that they had never known they possessed. Other species reported similar effects. The cold, calculating Thessic merchants had discovered something called generosity after doing business with humans who actually cared about fair deals. The warrior Kralith had learned that there were forms of strength besides physical combat, and many of them had become teachers and counselors instead of soldiers. Even the shattered theocracy of the Burning Path had transformed. After their defeat in the War of Sober Minds, many of their members had abandoned the old faith and started studying human philosophy instead. They found meaning not in chemical enlightenment, but in the human ideas of growth, connection, and purpose. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had done something far more revolutionary. They had simply been themselves, and in doing so, they had shown every other species that there were different ways to exist. The Vethkai trade had not collapsed as many had predicted. Instead, it had evolved into something new. Human brewers and cultivators had taken over much of the industry, applying their natural gift for agriculture and fermentation to the sacred nectar of the singing nebulae. They created blends and varieties that the galaxy had never imagined. Vethkai aged in wooden barrels, Vethkai infused with earth fruits and spices, Vethkai refined to emphasize different aspects of the transcendent experience. Human sommeliers could identify the exact nebular region of a vintage by taste alone, and they remained completely unaffected no matter how much they consumed. The most prestigious Vethkai producers in the galaxy now had human names, and their products commanded prices that would have been unthinkable 50 years ago. It turned out that species who could not personally experience something were often the best at understanding it objectively. But the greatest change humanity had brought to the galaxy was not economic or political. It was something far more personal. A young Vorani attaché named Krelix approached Ambassador Thelvrix during a quiet moment in the celebration, his crystalline form flickering with the bright purple of confusion. "Ambassador, I do not understand," Krelix said, gesturing at the humans who were now teaching aliens how to do something called the electric slide. They changed everything. They ended wars that had lasted millennia. They reformed economies that had exploited trillions of beings. They challenged beliefs that had guided civilizations for longer than their species existed. And they act like none of it matters. Thelvrix smiled, an expression he had learned from humans. "You think they should be prouder of their achievements?" "I think they should at least acknowledge them," Krelix replied. "When the Kralith conquered their sector, they built monuments that touched the clouds. When the Thessic dominated galactic trade, they named stars after their greatest merchants. Humanity reshaped everything, and they are over there trying to teach an Uvani how to juggle." The old ambassador laughed, another human gift. "That is exactly why they succeeded. They did not come to the stars seeking glory or power or transcendence. They came because they were curious, because they wanted to meet new people and try new things and see what was out there." He pointed to Admiral Vasquez, who was now showing her Kralith conversation partner pictures of her grandchildren on a small device. "Look at her. 50 years ago, she was the first human to taste our most sacred drink, and she called it juice. Today, she is one of the most famous beings in the galaxy, and she is more excited about her granddaughter's school play than any of her achievements." Krelix watched the scene, trying to understand. "They find wonder in small things?" "They find wonder in everything," Thelvrix corrected. "That is their secret. We spent millennia searching for meaning in cosmic revelations and transcendent experiences. But humans find meaning in a shared meal, a beautiful sunset, a child's laughter, a song that makes them tap their feet. He gestured at the ballroom full of celebrating beings. The cosmos is not special to them because everything is special to them. They experience the infinite not through sacred elixirs, but through the simple act of paying attention to the world around them. Sergeant Maria Torres, now white-haired but still recognizable as the woman who had held Proxima Station, appeared at Thelvrix's side with 2 glasses of Vethkai. "Ambassador, you are being too serious for a party. Here, have a drink and come dance with us." Thelvrix accepted the glass, knowing that the sacred elixir would still affect his Varani biology even after all these years. But he had learned that sometimes a little transcendence was worth the vulnerability. "I was just explaining to young Krelix why humans are the way they are," he said. Torres grinned. "Did you tell him it is because we are too stubborn to be miserable?" "I was trying to be more poetic about it." "Poetry is overrated," Torres said, grabbing Thelvrix's crystalline hand and pulling him toward the dance floor. "Come on, we are teaching the Yovani to do the cha-cha, and I need someone to help me demonstrate." As Thelvrix allowed himself to be dragged into the celebration, Krelix remained at the edge of the ballroom, watching with new understanding. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through superior weapons or advanced technology. They had not overwhelmed other species with their impossible biology or their resistance to Vethkai. They had simply invited everyone to the party and refused to take no for an answer. The young Varani's crystalline form flickered with something new, an emotion he had never felt before. Later, he would learn that humans called it joy. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and walked onto the dance floor to join the celebration. The galaxy would never be the same, and for the first time since his species evolved, that seemed like a wonderful thing. The stars continued to shine, the nebulae continued to sing, and somewhere in the vastness of space, a species that had once been considered too primitive for enlightenment was teaching the rest of the universe that enlightenment had been inside them all along. All it took was the courage to call it juice.